What's up, everyone? Welcome to episode 24 of Zipline, the Halloween episode. Yay. This is the official Zipper Interactive podcast.
Scary. That's scary.
I'm Chris Roper.
I'm Jeremy Denham. And today we are joined by Scott, Rudy, and Ben Jones. These guys are designers.
Yeah, both are all third time, I think. I believe.
Yeah. And they're three timers.
Yeah. Let's get to the Z-Cap.
So the big news this week is that we announced a date for Escalation DLC pack. A lot of people have been asking us for quite the many weeks when that's coming, and now you know it's coming on November 2nd, and that will include the Escalation mode itself, the 3 maps to go along with it that you may or may not remember from the beta, depending on whether or not you participated in it, and 9 new weapons. These will all be updated versions, some slight, some not so slight, of what you tested out in the beta, and just a quick note, when you guys do get it, there will be a very, very small patch to download at the same time, regardless if you buy it or not. It's and by small, I mean it's about 2 megabytes. So it'll be really quick. Just look for that November 2nd.
November 2nd also brings another kind of cool thing. People for a while have been saying, hey, what are you guys going to do about interdiction? To get some interdiction players in here. Please get some more people
playing. I beg your pardon.
Yeah, these kind of things.
What are you doing about interdiction?
Well, for a little while, we've been saying, look, we have some plans. We'll see what happens in the future. And the answer is that interdiction is going to be lowered down to the rough estimated price of $5. I believe it's $4.99.
In the U.S.
$4.95, yeah, in the U.S.
Okay.
So translate that to your local economy system. We're also introducing the MAG starter kit for about $15, $14.99. The MAG starter kit has both Escalation and Interdiction DLC packs, 30-day trials for both the B and C character slots, 3 dynamic themes, and 6 MAG-themed avatars. So basically, for the price of if you were to buy Escalation and Interdiction, you also get the trials, dynamic themes, MAG-themed avatars, all that kind of stuff.
Fun fact, the MAG avatars, the 6 of them, the existing one, 5 of the 6 are in the top 10 of best-selling avatars of all time on PSN.
And those are just the pictures of me and Ben, right?
That's right. Yes. The shirtless ones.
Yes, the men of Zipper. The men of MAG.
Those will also be in the MAG starter kit, so make sure you download them. Push us to number 1. Also, Wednesday, October 27th, that's the day that we released the 202 patch. And it's mainly built to address crashing issues, and it has a couple of PlayStation Move adjustments in there. But we, of course, we're aware that there are still people that do run into crashing issues, and we're continuing to investigate those at all times, and hopefully we can get rid of all of them. Our goal is to eliminate them as much as possible. So,
and I think some people had asked about the move adjustments in particular. I mean, I think those are mostly bug fixes. I don't know that we did a lot of additional tuning there. Mostly just, slight enhancements for gameplay experience, but no real tuning of numbers there. So, feel it out. It should just be a much smoother experience for you, but I don't think you'll have to go in and adjust any of your values.
Yeah, anyone hanging back and has not played with the move since we came out with the 2.0 patch, go back and revisit, because we did make some huge advancements once 2.0 came out. Mark Janis just hit it out of the ballpark. Ben was instrumental in a lot of it as well.
Did a lot of good work, too.
And our programmers are just, of course, top of the line.
Yep. And that's in reference to our beta, which some of you played it in the beta. We had a lot of really good feedback there. The difference between the move in the beta period versus 2.0, night and day, completely different, much better now.
It was beta. Imagine that, yeah.
And Mark Janis, for those of you who don't know, he hasn't been on the show before, but he's another one of the designers here. He's also in very good shape. Does he run? Does he bike?
I don't know. I don't notice those things, Jeremy. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Well, I do, because I'm incredibly out of shape. So I always recognize when people are much fitter than I am.
Is that why you keep on asking me if you can put your brain in someone else's body?
That is.
Okay.
Well, and I'm just sort of sadistic.
Moving on, the PS2 turned 10 years old this week.
Yay.
It's hard to believe that it's still on store shelves, which is kind of crazy. But when Sony says they've got the 10-year life cycle going on, believe it. Here's proof.
Quiz, Ben. How many SOCOM games came in on PS2?
18.
Close, 4.
Damn it. Of those 4 SOCOM games, we are finding that some media sites are putting together top 10 list, top 100 list, top 50, whatever, top list of best PS2 games ever. And we've SOCOM 2 in particular has made a bunch of these lists. It made it up onto IGN.com's top 100 list. GamePro did a list. It wound up as number 36 on GamePro's list.
32.
32, I'm sorry.
Out of 36.
Yeah, 32 out of 36. And then on, who's the other one where it's...
Games Radar.
That's
Games Radar broke their lists into 2 pieces. where we're concerned, but they actually did a lot more than that. But they, instead of saying overall throughout the decade, here are the top 100, they instead broke it up by decade, by year. So here are the top 10 for 2001, top 10 for 2002, etc. So for 2002, the original SOCOM made their number 8 position, which is great. And then for 2003, SOCOM 2 made it all the way to number 4. So that's awesome. Thanks for the recognition. And of course, since we're biased, we wish we were number 1 in all of them.
Yep.
Since the PlayStation 2 did turn 10 this week, we thought it'd actually be kind of a cool thing to revisit what everybody in the room did when PS2 came out, either on launch day itself or launch week, and just to see what you guys were up to. We'll start with Ben. Ben, do you remember what you were doing the week that the PS2 came out? How involved were you? What'd you do?
Yeah, I mean, I remember it was a big deal because a lot of us in the house that I was living at the time were all huge gamers, and we had some other consoles lying around, some that had exceptionally bulky controllers, which you might be familiar with, and a bunch of us, made the move. I remember my buddy Evan was the first one in our house to go and pick one up, and we got it back, and it was kind of this like big moment, and I think we were just kind of blown away by the return of the DualShock and how good it felt, and just the launch lineup was actually pretty respectable. So I mean, I think we were just all really happy, and I even to that point had always been a PC guy, and I was still heavily working on Day of Defeat at that time, and I was just impressed by this as a console. I mean, the thing that I had been impressed by the most before that was Nintendo, of course, and then this came along, and I was like, okay, well, this is the new standard for sure, and latched on, started playing it a lot, and shifted a lot of my focus from PC to the console moving forward.
Plus, they gave you a DVD player,
which was hot. I didn't really know what DVDs were. I mean, it was like some mythical thing, right?
The digital versatile disc. People think the V stands for video. It's actually versatile. That's for you.
It is, because it's also a Frisbee.
I'm that much wiser.
That's right.
That's
well,
awesome.
What did you do on PlayStation 2 launch day /week?
I was working at Pipeworks Interactive down in Eugene. Yeah, so we ran out, got a PS2, brought it back into work, set up a conference room, TV, and we're playing it pretty hard, trying to stress it, all that stuff, and learned a lot, respected it a lot, and it was impressive.
Roper, I know that.
I've told this story before, but I didn't pre-order a system unlike I did for the PS1 for whatever reason, and I'm sitting there at work in my web design job, and it's like 11:30 a.m. right before lunch, and I'm starting to go, I'm not going to get a PS2 anytime soon. I'm just going to go buy one now. And I left and told people around, because my boss wasn't there, to tell him that I went to buy a PS2. And so I went down to the Metron in San Francisco, and I was in line for about 13 hours and got one at 12:30 or something like that. And it was really cool, though, because we were sitting in line, and Sony would bring by sweatshirts and bring by little foods and stuff, kind of stuff you get on an airplane, bring by drinks and bottles of water and stuff from us. I remembered hearing stories of people going to buying systems and then getting mugged and stuff on the way home. And so I had to hide my bag under the corner, walking through downtown San Francisco, got back to my apartment and played till 4 in the morning or something, and then went to work the next day. Rest is history.
I feel kind of bad because when I got a PS2, I didn't wait in line at all. My wife, then girlfriend, worked at Babbage's, and she just put one to the side for me. So I just walked in and...
I thought you were just mugging people for their PS2s.
Picked it up. Yeah, well, that too, but that was for fun afterwards.
That's right.
But the whole reason that we were excited about is to go get Tekken Tag Tournament, because it was such a close approximation to the arcade game. It's pretty much identical, and our neighborhood was full of Tekken players, so we were really excited about it. And that was my big launch title. We went in specific with that game in mind, and we got it. We played the hell out of it and loved it. And I also liked the fact that I had a DVD player outside of my computer, and I could now watch movies on my TV instead of just on my little computer monitor. If you remember in those days, too, the flat screens weren't exactly prevalent, so there was this giant, bulky CRT thing.
I still have mine. It's awesome.
Yeah. But those are our PS2 memories.
Some good ones. It brings back tears.
And wipe those tears away. I'd actually be interested to hear from some of our fans, to hear about their first PS2 experiences. And if they sound cool, they're interesting, we might put them in our next episode. Share them with everyone.
With that, let's talk about some SOCOM here. Let's ask you guys a couple questions about here. The first one, we want to know, so what we've talked about recently, I think a couple people on the show have mentioned that we're kind of, I think starting with Brian Soderbergh when he was on here, he was mentioning how the studio is kind of shifting to full swing, let's get SOCOM out of the door, right? And so you guys, between some of your mag duties, are kind of going back and forth now.
You're helping out.
Exactly. What have you guys been doing with SOCOM?
Well, quite a lot of late. A while back, I started working on multiplayer pathing and cover enhancement, going through and doing some basic bug fixing just to familiarize myself with the environments. And after that, I've started actually on the side investigating a little DLC stuff to kind of figure out, like, okay, if we have some time,
if we have time,
either at the end of development cycle or post-release, like what we could possibly do with our existing resources and trying to come up with some compelling ideas there. And actually, right now, I'm throwing myself full into the user interface for SOCOM 4 and working with the UI team and the leads for single player to multiplayer, and really trying to figure out exactly what we can do with the time we have left to make the UI as friendly as possible, and to spruce it up and make it a little more competitive with the rest of the titles out there. Because if you've noticed, especially in the shooter market, with each shooter that comes out, it seems like they're doing something new with the user interface that really pulls players in, and it gives them the information they need. But it also, in a really cool, compelling way, but it also, takes it away really quickly so that they can continue to focus on the action.
Right.
And I think we need to spend some time polishing those elements for SOCOM 4 as well. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, there's a lot to keep us busy for sure. Scott?
And I'm helping out the weapons guys quite a bit on SOCOM 4.
Which is Ryan Feggi.
Ryan Feggi, very skilled designer. And just basically, there's just a ton of work. And there's a lot of stuff that I had set up in the dark ages that is well hidden and tricky.
Because we had talked about this before. You had kind of done it before SOCOM was in massive
I went on
swing,
to Mag,
and then so now you come full circle.
And so I've returned to my roots, and it's basically just helping him out, facilitating for him, pointing stuff out. If he needs me to do a tuning pass on something, I do it, and then basically give it back to him, and just really help out where I can, because I know where a lot of the bodies are buried in how our game works.
Without getting into any specifics here, because you did a lot of the weapon stuff on Mag also, without giving direct differences between guns that might be in the two games, what is the difference, like, I guess, addressing the two audiences, Mag audiences versus SOCOM audience?
Sure. I mean, the biggest and the most obvious one is you do first-person weapons a lot differently than the third-person weapons. And also with SOCOM 4, you have the history behind SOCOM. And so with Mag, we were a little more free to experiment and go off the beaten path. And with the SOCOM games, there's certain styles and expectations that we have to pay attention to, because we have a core audience and they're important to us. And so we always do what's in our best judgment, but we always keep in our vision of what are the fan expectations of our weapons. And again, just doing third person based shooting games is very different from the first person stuff.
Can you give an example of how an assault rifle in Mag would feel different to a player using an assault rifle in SOCOM 4?
A lot of the stuff is the accuracy and recoil stuff. In a third-person cam, you really have to tune it differently. A lot of the stuff with first-person stuff, you can exaggerate or tone down certain things. And I don't want to go into too many details now, because we're still really working on this stuff, and it will and will change. You just basically you play around with variables different, just due inherently to the camera system being way back behind the player. Sounds like it's mild, but it's different from first person. You really do have to be careful with a lot of things and make sure it's usable by our players.
Let's get to a question from M. Chaza, and he wants to know, for the Move controller, have you thought of making the color of the ball change depending on your health? A lot of players know when you start up a game, it'll be a different color for different games or what have you. Or different players even in the same game. And he wants to know if the idea had been thrown around to make, say, if you're at full health, have the ball be green, then change maybe to orange if you're middle, or if you're about to die, go down to red color.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's something we talked about, extensively when we were looking at move support for Mag. What we ended up doing, which we thought was a little cooler, is tying it to your faction, because we had those colors supported the red, green, and blue for Raven, Valor, and Sever, and We just thought that was a good choice, and we didn't actually have a lot of time for the implementation either, so we wanted to make sure we got it right. But yeah, it's definitely been thrown out there for SOCOM. I think it's a pretty cool idea. It just really depends on the number of ideas that continue to come forth during development, and we have to pick one, obviously, and go with a system that we think makes the most sense. But I think that's pretty compelling.
I talked to the team actually who was working on that element for SOCOM 4 to find out, because a lot of people brought it up internally and externally about what a cool feature it'd be. And ultimately, what I've been told, and I think it makes a lot of sense, is that in this case, for SOCOM 4 at least, is that the precision has to be so exact for your gun in order to hit your targets at a 1-to-1 ratio that changing the colors could actually alter how well the controller responds, because
during the change,
yeah, because it's calibrated to a certain color when you first start it up.
Yep, and that's definitely true. The other thing we had to look at a lot was the difference in color between background. And one of the things you'll see actually in the dev diary that we did for Mag Move, we had this flat background, and the color of the wand was actually interfering with the background. So Mark's shots were actually going off. He's like, "Why can't I kill anyone? I don't understand. I designed this system. I'm good. I promise." And he was really struggling, and we were like, "God, I'll figure it out." And they're like, "Oh yeah, that's right." So I mean, it definitely makes a huge difference, especially if you could imagine like you were wearing a red shirt and your health went down to where you were almost dying, and then the accuracy of it caused you to die. How frustrating would that be?
Sounds like gameplay. I like it.
There's also that the other factor is that if you're playing the game, we want you to look at the screen and not your controller. We want you to feel like you're enjoying the experience in front of you and not having to stop and look at your hand every now and then to make sure you're okay.
There's also several highly placed Zipper employees that are in fact colorblind, which we would hear angry emails about. This actually came up in previous games that I've worked on. Is the greens are friends and reds are enemies, and no other iconic differences is actually a bad thing. We'd get several angry emails from those who were genetically broken, as I like to refer to them.
Well, I'm sure they appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty representative too. I mean, there's a lot of colorblind game players out there too, and I think we have to kind of take that stuff into consideration.
Right.
Yeah.
Kevin89 wants to know if you can pick grenades off of dead bodies. Rope, we've played through single player both all the way through recently.
And we've played some multiplayer.
Yeah,
we played
just today actually.
Play a little bit of SOCOM.
For a good long time.
SOCOM sometimes. The answer to this is yes, but with some caveats. We were kind of talking about this beforehand. Is, as you might assume, you can stock a couple secondary gear items. So you say, let's choose a frag grenade and a smoke grenade, or a frag grenade and something else, right? We don't want you to, let's say, have a frag grenade and some other device, and then be able to also pick up a smoke grenade, because then you've got 3 kinds of secondary items. Or another. So basically, the short answer is that you can only pick up grenades that you are already stocking. You could have run out and picked up some more, but you can't have grenade A and B and then pick up type C.
Right. But to be fair, that system is still being worked on. We're still making sure that everything feels right, and nothing's 100% until it ships. So who knows? But right now, that's the system that we're using, and it makes sense.
Tiberius213 wants to know that, in your opinions, what game does SOCOM 4 most resemble, and what are its most redeeming qualities?
It's a tough one. I mean, in any game you make, you're kind of carving out unique ground. You don't want to just spit out more of the same. Going back to my nod at our core group, we certainly want to make it a SOCOM game. So, an easy answer is, well, look at the previous SOCOMs, and you're going to find probably your nearest comparison, of course. Honestly, the console shooters have gotten to the point now where there are certain conventions, and so rather than we're like one certain game, we share common backgrounds with a lot of other games. So, if you take any one of our competitors out there, we're down to the point now where a lot of games are doing stuff the same way. It's like now, what is it, back 5 or 10 years ago, if a PC first-person shooter came up with something other than the WSAD movement thing, it would be laughed at, right? I think console games are moving more towards that direction as well. Of course, with innovation and stuff, but there's certain standards you conform to. So in one way, we're a lot like what's out there. In another way, we're a lot like previous SOCOMs. And in another way, we are SOCOM 4. We are our own unique style of game.
I think a different way to look at it is there are expectations for SOCOM fans, then there are also expectations for people who play lots of different games. They're going to expect them all to kind of work the same way. And you have to kind of figure out what works for best for those.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I think we've used both of those that you illustrated as baselines and then really taken it in a different direction to create, something really new with SOCOM 4. I mean, it's different for us in that the single player for me is just really engaging. And, you've got this deep story and, fantastic cutscenes and voice acting and characters. It's just a little more rich than anything that we've really done in the past. So I think that's probably what stands out to me the most is the amount of effort that we've put in there in single player to make it this really.
I've actually found myself like ducking as I play the game in real life. I'm all you're in an engaging game when you're actually reacting to what you're seeing on the screen with your actual body. So it's doing pretty well. It's doing pretty well.
Pipe wants to know if SOCOM 4 will have accurate hip fire like in past SOCOMs.
Yeah, I mean, it's
depends on the weapon, right?
Yeah.
On the weapon.
Yeah, your hips
pretty
do not
accurate
fire.
to me.
Yeah, your hips do not fire by themselves. You use weapons.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is going to be fairly accurate. Yeah, we are going towards the more accurate, trying to keep that nod towards our SOCOM user base, which is a accurate weapon user base. So we also have the aim mode that makes you more accurate as well, but it's not like your bullets are going to be going all over the place. No random bullet spray.
Chris and I were doing some experiments earlier today, actually, with scopes and the red dot sights and whatnot too. And there's actually a definite difference if you decide not to use hip fire, if you decide to do something like a red dot sight versus a scope.
Right.
Definite difference in how it handles and its accuracy. But the good news is that it still feels. Regardless of what method you're taking, it feels right. It feels natural, which I think is a really good step in the right direction.
That's another area where we are moving towards a standard. A lot of games now, you do have the unaim mode and then the aim mode, and almost universally the aim mode is more accurate and yet less of the reactionary type of gameplay. So,
What I like about it the most is, like, say if you have a red dot equipped, is that you've got variables for zoom, right? I mean, you can press L1 and you can zoom in a little bit, and it tightens in on the shoulder, right? So you've got a more narrow perspective, and that helps with accuracy as well. But then you press R3, and boom, it pops up, the red dot sight as if you're in a first-person shooter. For me, that's great. I prefer first-person shooters, but being able to play SOCOM in that way is awesome because it gives me the flexibility. And actually, to that point, we've had a couple of usability testers come in the past couple of days. And while most of them are playing in traditional third person using the shoulder cam, a lot of them have found that red dot, the third option, and are you can. What's nice is you click it, and then that becomes your zoom option, right? You can toggle it as you want. And a lot of guys were just playing it that way. They would zoom in and they were playing it essentially in first person, and they would run around in third, and then boom, as soon as they want to fire, they're pulling it up. And that was really, really useful for them in the feedback that we got afterwards.
It's really flexible. It really is. How do you want to play the game?
Yep.
As a side note, one of my favorite things about the usability tests we've been having lately is that we have so when we do our usability tests, I don't know how many of you have ever actually seen one out there maybe on YouTube or another place. But we're watching the game, we're watching the person play the game. Watching the people play the game is actually highly entertaining because some of them get so into it, and the expressions they make and the reactions they have, it's good because it means you're doing something right to actually evoke that kind of reaction from people.
At times it can be extremely frustrating, especially early in development, because there's always the point where you are convinced that everything is very obvious and perfect. And you get these players come in and prove you that you are just incredibly wrong.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, pull the latch. No, pull the latch. Pull the latch! And they are not seeing it. And that gives you a clue of, this is why you do the focus test, is, wow, that's not really obvious enough that they need to pull the latch. So earlier in development, nowadays it's pretty sweet because most of the stuff is pretty much working and it feels nice and stuff. But early focus tests for you developers out there who have not undergone it before, just brace yourself.
The last SOCOM question for the week comes from HyperBoost671. Wants to know Easter eggs. Will there be any?
Yes.
All right.
Well, no, I mean we'll have things that you can find. There's going to be things, hidden things that you can look for in the game, and on top, not to mention things that aren't necessarily tied to gameplay, just little things that artists and other people involved and the designers in the game wanted to throw in there for keen observers, and not just visual stuff, but there are some Easter eggs in the audio variety as well.
Yep. Let's get to some mag questions here. The first one comes from Magma21456.
Liquid hot magma.
Wants to know is, what are the chances of changing Escalation so that the letter objective colors reflect the PMC that currently holds it? So, for example, Raven would be purple, Valor is green, Sever would be orange. That if you had A owned by Sever, it would turn orange.
So that's something that we did look at. I don't know if a lot of people saw the final implementation. It was like 0.04 or whatever that we did in the beta.
Yeah, it was only a few days before the beta was
and it really just a couple days went down there because the user interface, that team is so busy with SOCOM 4 that they didn't have a lot of time, and it came in late, like the changes that we made to the game type there. But we tried it, but we were a little hesitant simply because we have a convention there, right? It's a certain color when you hold it, and it's a certain other color when the enemy holds it. And now you have two enemies. So, changing it to the multicolors is interesting, but what we decided to do instead is to show you that faction icon so that you could still denote ownership in a binary fashion, right, with the two colors, and then see either, the fact that you own it or which faction is taking it from you, or the other, which essentially who's fighting over what, because we thought that was, a little more informational, and you could get it at a glance that, state and ownership in one go there.
Partner, who has a frequent question monger, ask a lot of questions every week, wants to know, why is the order for the grenade launcher primary, secondary, launcher? Why not primary, launcher, secondary?
Sure, this was a decision way back, a year before we shipped MAG. So this back in the 80s, I think, is how far this went back. We all had like New Wave hairdo. It was awesome. And so I think the thinking back in the day was that since the grenade launcher was an optional attachment, we were trying to look for the least impactful of your muscle memory at the time. And so if you're used to going from primary to secondary, so you're out of ammo on the primary, you want to pull out that pistol and nail someone, finish them off. We didn't want something in the way, an additional step that may or may not be there and just ruin it all for you. And so we decided to put it after the secondary to make it less painful for those types of situations.
And muscle memory is important because I don't think anybody out there in the public, it's maybe possible they have if they went to E3, played MAG before we changed the way that knives work.
Yeah.
In the beginning, knives were a much more complicated way, or they were assigned in a way that made them a lot more complicated than they are now.
Yeah.
And when I played the game at E3, before I was even at Zipper, I remember at that time, I was like, wow, my reaction to wanting to pull my knife out and attack someone, it doesn't feel right because it doesn't feel smooth or what I'm used to doing in other games. So I think that's a key point, is making sure that it feels familiar without intruding in the experience.
And if anyone wants to try this at home, it's just, I'm sure it's a very familiar situation for most of our users, is you play some other game or you take a break from playing MAG for a while. When you first get in, you have to kind of rememorize how things work. And then, because if you're thinking about what button do I push to do X, you're not shooting somebody else, and you're certainly getting shot.
Yeah. It's really tough. We agonize over controls, right?
Yeah.
They're like naming almost, because regardless of what you do, not everyone in the studio or in the community is going to be happy with it.
Or even
right?
within the design team.
Yeah, exactly. We are all
pretty serious
yelling at each
discussions.
other over anything.
Yeah,
and it's
Ben
usually,
used to punch me. It was horrible.
I still do. It's
okay,
fun.
That's true.
But yeah, that's really tough. It's one of those things that as a designer, I find really, really difficult. But again, it comes down to conventions and what people think is right and easy. So.
Yep.
IAFF Captain Norm, something like that, says he only plays MAG for about half an hour or so at a time because of burn-in on his plasma set. He's worried about getting letters and stuff stuck in there. How hard would it be to let us turn the HUD off or to change the opacity level for these things in a future update? I have a secondary question for him. Is game modes will last only half an hour, MAG, and then so you would go back to the hey, pick a new game or whatever. So you figure it would change.
And that's
away
at most.
Yeah, and so I don't think that it should have that problem anyway. But anyway, if you're still worried about it,
people are definitely conscious of burn-in, though.
Right.
I get that, especially with an older set. There were so many HUD options that we wanted to put in.
Yeah,
I can think of
we're
some.
not really planning on letting the players do that at this point, mainly because you can actually just go back to the main menu and take a break and level up your character and stuff. And yeah, so honestly, it's not on our list really to allow those kind of options now.
There's also the threat of burn-in over it actually happening. I mean, just about every plasma. I've a couple plasmas at home. I know, Chris, you have plasmas. Whenever I play anything or watch anything, particularly when there's a bar that's there for a certain amount of time, it's there on the TV, but it's if you pay attention, it's actually typically wiped away immediately once a new image comes in. So specifically in the newer sets. So like you mentioned, Ben, if it's an older set, you're probably more prone, but a lot of the newer sets, burn-in really is not that much of an issue anymore because they're smart enough to realize, this is just refreshing the image. And
I think the other thing that's interesting is, you could really only be a concern if you were just an insane player and had like a 80-3 round, because there's so many screen transitions in MAG. I mean, you're going to bleed out state and then death and then back to the mini map, and you're bouncing around so that there are very few persistent images on the screen.
Yeah.
So
really, the lesson here is don't be a camper.
Right,
Exactly. Yeah, move around,
Absolutely.
and you won't get plasma burn-in.
Be a good teammate.
The real answer is, as Sony employees, we're trying to look for ways to make you buy new TVs as
buy
much
the LED
as possible.
backlit.
Absolutely.
No
So if
burn-in
you just
on
go up to
those.
sonystyle.com, you will see plenty of
$5,000.
other brand new TVs that are a much better option.
Yeah.
Kagahoshi says that there's been a lot of talk about tying contracts to maps. So, for example, Sever takes Raven's domination contracts, and as a result, Sever now defends Raven's map in domination. Is it possible to do? And could it be a possible influence mag question in the future?
This is something that we could do right now. We're not very inclined to do it right now because things seem to be going pretty good for domination. For example, So I don't think it's another one that's not
without
really on the
naming
radar.
it specifically. He's also talking about making those maps faction neutral in a sense, right? And that's something that the community struck down in a previous question. And it's something that we were really torn as a development team on, and are really hesitated on. So, though the idea is cool, and it's actually something that we, in the initial implementation, we wanted to do, right? Saying like, okay, now you get the contract, you defend the map until you fight it and win the contract back. Now it's your own map, and certain advantages would be tied to that, right? It's great, it's a cool idea, but the faction neutrality thing is really tough. As we've seen in Sabotage, people are already really torn on it. So pushing it to the other maps, we're really wary.
You know what's really funny about that is when we did the influence mag for domination, we had the poll up for a day or so, and the poll was being kind of cheated. People were logging in and out and kind of doing it. And so we reset the poll, right? But before this happened, people were writing to us and they're saying, "Hey, people are cheating on the poll. People are coming from these other sites and doing it." We had two kinds of people that wanted faction neutrality and people that didn't. And so somebody would write in, and if they were for faction neutrality, they would say, people are cheating and they're voting against faction neutrality. If it doesn't pass, clearly it's because they cheated. You can't allow this. And then we would get the very next message from the other end. If it does go faction neutral, that means they cheated. And so clearly and I'm like...
But if anything, that speaks to the contentious nature of the question, right? I mean, obviously, there's a rift there. So
this is like the deja vu for the current voting environment that I'm seeing.
And if you want any more proof that it is really a hot button issue, the percentage difference is 1% between the fors and the againsts. Yeah. So it's obvious it's something that's split down the middle, and it's probably never going to change.
I know it came up on like a Drudge report. The domination faction neutral issue is like one of his little siren images. Scandal.
V. Revis Jr. says, why were the voiceovers removed from the start of the map, and is there any chance that they'll come back?
Yeah, so that's it's an interesting question. I think Mary had touched on it in a previous podcast. A lot of it has to do with translation time and getting VO out there for translation, and obviously
it's not just translation; it's also re-recording.
There's a ton of new stuff. It's a very involved process, and we would have had to do that for both interdiction and escalation.
And we'd need to make sure that the voice actors are all available to re-record.
Right, which and a lot of these guys are pretty popular, especially within the games industry and whatnot. So
we could have done it in this room, though. We were doing podcasts.
We could have brought them in. Yeah,
speak with a French accent.
Just bring it.
It's. I mean, there are just so many factors at play there that it was a very hard decision for us because I love that stuff. I mean, it gives you some flavor, it pumps you up for the battle a little bit, but ultimately, I mean, we had to take it out just because of all the factors at play.
Yeah, and I think another thing that she mentioned was that doing one or two lines was kind of hey, let's get these people in there and have them record one line. and that'll be more likely to get them brought back in the more and more content that we need to add back to it. So if we can get somebody in for half a day rather than just one line and kind of do all of these things in one shot, then
they can make it a triumphant return.
So maybe they will come back, but just not right now.
Shadowman4 wants to know, in what ways has Escalation been polished since the beta period?
Very good question.
The
Game
last
type
people
stuff
saw,
at the end, yes, it was pretty close. Again, that last beta iteration was up for like 8 hours or something. A lot of people might have missed it, but scoring adjustments, some polish here and there, pulling
took off some of the rough edges,
pulling in out of bounds areas a little bit. I think I tuned some like spawn sight lines, stuff like that, but. Mostly really minor stuff. So if you played in the later stages of the beta, I think it's going to be pretty close. Oh, one change that we did throw in last minute that I don't think anybody saw in the Sever Escalation map in the core D objective. There's now an extra room as passage. So if it's hard to describe, but in one of the areas we essentially had like 3 paths intersecting in this one long hallway that I called the Hallway of Doom. And it was a little rough, so change that up. Now there's only 2 ways into there, and there's another route that takes you to the bottom through another room into the that ground floor. So that actually, I think within the office was a really positive change, and looking forward to seeing the reaction to that.
On that note, the beta from its first iteration to its final iteration was up for several weeks. What would you think is the what is the most valuable information that you guys, as designers, took away from that beta period that you could then apply to the game? Maybe not even just to Escalation directly, but towards the game and possible future updates, or even SOCOM 4 or projects beyond that. What was most important for you?
Ben, why don't you do map stuff and I'll do weapon and other stuff?
Sure, yeah, because I know for sure you want to talk about the knife changes, because those were definitely big. Yeah. On the map side, I mean, again, scoring was huge for us. It's one of the things that's a big variable. We change those values from time to time, since we've launched MAG, especially in like the domination missions, to try to get those, a little more balanced, and the numbers we're seeing now are better. But we'll continue to change those. But I mean, the beta period for us was huge. This is a completely new game type, right? So we put some values in, kind of guessing based on our internal play tests, and the players out in the beta were instrumental, really.
Because MAG, again, is a hard game to test because you need so many players.
So many people, and so we have limited resource to actually test it. That's why, one of the reasons we went with the beta. So thank you guys for helping us
Developer
get it right.
note to self.
Yeah.
Just right there. Yeah.
Don't make a game that you need to test and enjoy more players than you have members of your company.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was the biggest one for me. What do you guys got?
Well, we saw this a little bit before we released MAG a year ago. Just basically, you think you know how various systems work, and then you get real players in there, and you are just, oh my god, we have to change things, and we have to improve things, and there's some exploits that you never saw coming. The knives, I'm sure everybody had a lot of fun. I've got about 20 million personal messages from the forums, usually death threats or people instructing me the finer points of using knives, and by the way, they could show me.
Another note on that, though, is the kind of where they ended up when 2.0 came out. People were saying, this is great, and then we'd also get messages, this is awful. And so no matter what, people don't...
Sure, I get the threats that I better change that, and also, at the same time, I get the threats I better not change it. And so... it's tricky. It's really, the beta did its job. It showed us actually where we were wrong, where our expectations were off. And this is why you do betas, is you find out what your users, what real people, because QA guys, I love them and they do so much great work and stuff, but they're professional game breakers, right? Yeah. But they pale in comparison to the hundreds of millions of people that can come out there and just do crazy stuff and do it 300 times.
Another thing is they know the game.
Yeah.
Right? So they're not a random person jumping in who'd never played the game before and had just bought it and just bought the DLC, and they don't know what they're doing and running around and not figuring,
Right. And unlike our QA guys, we can't fire them if they say we have a problem.
Right.
Right. So it's tough to shut up our users.
Silent Bob and show up at their house.
Yeah, absolutely.
I got to say, though, one of the best parts for me about that whole process is that unlike a lot of our competitors out there, I mean, we not only have the desire, but the means to actually change these things, right? I mean, MAG, as far as shooters go, has probably had the most patches, of any modern generation shooter on a console. I mean, it's been crazy, all the amount of patches that we put out, not only content driven, but, adjusting based on the things that we see out in the real world. And, that's great for me because the game is constantly changing and it's getting better. It's really evolving. So that's been awesome.
Yeah, it's always been a frustration in my career. I've been doing this for 16 years, and you always ship a game, and you're always just like, God, if we just had another month, we could have polished this, we could have done that. And with Mag, we shipped it, and we were really happy with shipping it. And then, post-ship, you're just like, God, a lot of people seem to like this. So, you know what? Let's add a feature where we can exploit that and make it really fun rather than just enjoyable. So,
right. And a lot of games do that with sequels, but what's been nice for us is that we already have the pipeline, we have everything in place, so let's just crank it out, get it out there to players, and let them continue to enjoy this game that they've already paid for.
Right. Getting on with questions here. Homestar Runner 9, a celebrity or a faker, I don't know, wants to know, if we buy Escalation DLC, will we have to spend in-game CP to buy the guns that it comes with?
Yes, mainly because as weapon designer, every gun that is paid for with CP in game, I get a percentage of with real money. So you're damn right, you have to pay CP in game.
You are the cause of the national debt.
Well, this is true. Right. I am the national money hole. So you buy it, you buy access to it, and you still have to use the in-game CP system to actually go out and buy that weapon. So it was a design choice that we made, and we're going to stick with it. And we think it's not too punishing. It's 3 weapons. Come on, man up.
Well, in worst case, what's cool about these weapons is they're a replacement for existing categories, right? And in some cases, categories where there are already multiple weapons. Yeah. So, I mean, if you're an assault rifle guy and you got 2 assault rifles, but you got the Escalation pack, just sell one of the assault rifles. You can't love them both equally. I mean, there's got to be one that you like more than the other. So the one that you don't like as much, sell it. Use that CP towards your purchase of the new assault rifle. I love the new weapons, man. I got to say, I'm really happy with the way they turned out, and I think everybody that picks up Escalation is going to be really happy with them as well.
Click has a question that Ben touched on a little bit earlier. He wants to know, why did Zipper allow people to vote for or against the domination map neutrality that we talked about earlier when we didn't ask for input when this was done for suppression or sabotage in a patch earlier this year?
Good question. It's a much bigger thing. I think with the suppression and sabotage, one, it was kind of a test bed, so we wanted to start small and see how it went. But 2, the domination and acquisition missions are so large that they affect a much larger group of people, and we wanted to take baby steps towards it. And, I'm really glad we did it that way because, as, we've mentioned in this podcast multiple times now, super contentious, right? Like, some people love it, some people hate it, a lot of people aren't even sure, and I think for that reason, we hesitated a little bit and we said, let's put this out to the community and see what they think before we continue with this process.
A Higher Place wants to know if there's any way that perimeters on existing maps could be extended.
Probably not, no. We basically build these maps in a very specific way, and the boundaries are a core element of the maps. Not a lot we can do with it.
No. And most of what's beyond the perimeter is just art anyway. It's not actually playable map, playable map area.
And that's for memory purposes, right? I mean, there's so much going on in Mag's maps that we have to really condense it and keep it that way.
Risky PSID says, is the motion sensor jammer relationship being examined by you, Rudy? The jammer is useful to hide sprint at all times, and it seems almost universally used, making the motion sensor almost universally useless. This counter-item relationship seems heavily skewed in one direction.
And yet we still see a lot of people out there with the motion sensors. So, it's another one of those things that are highly contentious. You get these people that are quite happy with the way it is, and those who it drives them nuts. And so all we can say is, we play the game, we see these things, and right now we are actually pretty happy with the way things are working. Yeah, that's really all I can say is it's this stuff costs money, takes up gear slots, and everything has a purpose. And if some people think that something's a little overpowered, that's their opinion, and they're welcome to it.
And one thing that we have that the fans don't have is data. We actually can pull the information from a huge amount of games and look to see what's actually being done and how it works. And sometimes perception does not match reality.
Correct.
Right.
It is what it is, like Rudy's stamp of approval. Just bang!
Al Yo-Yo wants to know if we have thought about pulling specific community members and having them go into mag groups with you to test certain weapons, features, or whatever.
I do this all the time. I mean,
yeah.
there are a lot of us in clans that are not, I mean, we had the Zip clan or whatever, and most of us have actually broken off into separate clans populated by community members.
Sure.
Actually, Click, who asked one of the questions, is in the clan that I'm in, and I pull those guys for data all the time, and I just post a question and don't say anything and just kind of let them talk it out and fight over and hear all the voices and then kind of take that into consideration, and we bring that stuff up in our design meetings.
Yeah. I'm a big stealth player. I've got a billion different IDs that I play mag under, and sometimes I'm like, wow, this is pretty neat. What do you guys think? Or, yeah, wow, what about this weapon? And stuff like that. So
I can only imagine you over the microphone. Hey, greatest game ever, right?
Yeah. God, these knives rock.
bro.
Yeah. How do we get Zipper to put jetpacks in this thing? Come on, let's start a petition.
Panichu wants to know if there's any chance that we'd ever be able to go into a map on our own without teammates to explore the areas and possibly even face bots. Bots, we've talked about many times, to help familiarize yourself with those areas.
Unfortunately not. Mag, due to its scale and just the very specific way we architectured all of our systems, not very friendly for doing that. In fact, every game thinks that it's a net game. We have some behind-the-scenes stuff we do for development, server on client stuff and other tricks and stuff like that. But bots certainly is not possible without a major rewrite of our systems and such. So no one should be looking for this feature.
And the last question of the week is an audio question coming from Lance Corporal Coolbean.
That's an awesome name.
Hey, you guys, Lance Corporal Coolbean here. I have a quick, sort of silly question, but what is the most popular way to transport files around the office? USB? Is it on a network or whatever? I don't know. Just wanted to know.
Usually with an image of a cat.
3.5-inch disc.
We have a couple of ways, right? We have email is the best way to transfer pictures, funny pictures and YouTube videos.
Oh, yes.
Yep. Yes.
And then we also
which is all we do, really.
That's why, the long and short of it.
And then we have an internal file sharing system that we use that we use
We don't really use physical media in any fashion.
We have an internal
if that's what the
wiki.
question is. Yeah.
Can we actually add mnemonic tubes?
Awesome.
Oh, like at banks?
That would be sweet.
That'd be sweet. You just get hate mail all day. It'd be awesome.
That'd be awesome, as long as I hear the thump.
Yeah.
Actually, before you cut it off, it's not the last question of the week.
Whoa.
I've got a
monkey
surprise
wrench.
question.
Stealth question.
Surprise question that wasn't on the sheet. I'm going to put him on the spot. One of the things that comes up, especially recently, is something that both of you guys have talked about with us several times, both on the podcast and outside of the podcast, and that's bringing back friendly fire damage for knives. We get that asked a lot. When is that going to return? And when is the other thing that we've discussed often, making you invincible to teammates when activating an objective, going to happen?
So we can't guarantee anything, but we have a list of things that we'd like to do for a future patch, of which both of those are on the list. So without any guarantees, yes, it's on the list. We want to do it. It's doable. It comes down to time and resources, and like everybody knows, we're trying desperately to ship S4. So we'll see what happens, but I mean, yeah, we want it just as much as you. So.
This is a big wish list item for us.
Yes, most definitely.
With that, I believe, if nobody has any more questions, Scott, do you want to ask the last one? What?
Nope,
all right,
I got nothing.
Let's end the show then. Thank you, Ben and Scott, for coming on the show here. And thank you to everybody listening. As always, if you want to send us some questions, you can write us at Zipline at ZipperINT. Send us your questions. If you want to send us an audio question, send us an MP3, no more than 10 seconds long, and please include the content of the question in the body of the email. It makes it way easier for us to figure out what you're asking us.
If you don't send us emails, you can always go to the official threads found on mag.com and SOCOM.com. Go to the forum section, then choose blog discussion. We have official threads set up on both areas to ask our guests whatever you want for our next podcast. You can also leave comments. Do whatever feels right. You can do it right there. And, of course, we also have our blogs you can check out for information in between podcasts.
Or send Jeremy a page. He likes those.
And you can also find us on
1997.
Whatever, don't lie.
Are you a drug dealer?
You can find us. And I wish GeoCities hadn't gone away. I had a nice page I made in there about on college about liking rats and stuff. Anyway, you can find us on Facebook and Twitter at facebook.com/zipperinteractive and twitter.com/zipper. Oh, and facebook.com/SOCOM.
There you go.
A lot of call-outs.
Our next episode is slated for Friday, November 12th. We'll have more details on the subject and who the guest or guests will be as we get closer to that podcast. Don't forget to download and rate us on iTunes.
And you can subscribe to the podcast on there. Yep.
Yes, you can. But rate us. Give us whatever you think is fair, but hopefully
But
rate
it'll
us.
be 5.
Yeah, make sure it's
of course.
5.
That seems fair.
Yeah.
Again, thank you guys very much for coming on the show. Always a pleasure to have you. On behalf of everyone here at the company, happy Halloween. Be safe. Take it easy.
Okay, that just scared the hell out of me.
Dude, holy